Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corene from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, or 3 a.m. in the morning when you are listening to this, and welcome to Keep It Fictional, a book podcast for book lovers by book lovers from the Port Moody Public Library. Now, I'm very excited for today's episode, and I wanted to start it by saying Happy Pride, or Pride Season, as we kind of have to collectively say, because usually June is Pride Month in most of the world, except for weirdly Vancouver, which celebrates it in August, which, as we were discussing before, feels misplaced, as it is always. The parade is always like the hottest, sunniest, most brutal day in the entire calendar, but it's always a fantastic, fantastic time. So today I am joined by my book friends Sadie and Virginia, and we are here to celebrate works from the LGBTQIA2S+ community. And let's just name them: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and trans, queer and questioning, intersex, asexual or agender, and two-spirit plus. So for all of those fantastic, fantastic authors who identify, we are here today to celebrate some works that have kind of like spoken to us. It's really hard to choose. I'm sure for all of my fellow book friends, this is such a huge kind of rich stew to take one tiny teaspoon out of. So anytime we get like a big topic like this, celebrating a month or a group, it's really hard to choose. So I'm going to spring this on I was going to say contestants, but I don't think that's the same thing. Yeah. So Virginia, how did you choose this particular book?
Publisher, that's usually how I kind of go with these. And so, yeah, it was one that I have been on my radar for a while. And so I was just like, this is perfect. And it's short, also perfect.
It's the summer. Summer is time for sometimes for short books. Sadie, how did you choose this particular book?
I think for me, I went with genre, kind of went with the kind of book that I was in the mood for. And I think going off of that kind of summer theme with short books, I like to read books that I don't necessarily have to think too much about, books that are kind of just already in my wheelhouse and ones that I know that based on the genre, I am going to enjoy. And so that was my strategy this time.
Yeah, I went for one that has been on my list for a little while. So as we know, and as I'm sure you've probably heard, there is kind of like a rash of book banning in the United States, targeting literature by LGBTQIA2S+ authors, trying to remove them from library shelves, trying to remove them from schools. And this is a particular book that has been challenged quite a lot, sometimes unsuccessfully, sometimes successfully. And so I chose this book as it had kind of always been on my radar. Halfway through reading it, I realized that I think I had actually read it before. It's like, this is familiar. And to this day, meaning today, I still can't actually figure out whether I had read it before or whether it just like felt like such a deeply held truth that it felt so authentic in that way. I'm going to have to check my Goodreads because I was like, I'm pretty sure I've read this, but it's so good. So yeah, I went with one kind of on that list that has been challenged quite a few times, and just so that I could kind of have that understanding of why that book was particularly attacked, and I do understand why. So
is there an understanding though?
Oh, not those people. No, not that. But it's like, sometimes in order to like take apart someone's argument, you have to understand what they're misinterpreting. And so like, even in this particular book, there's a lot of like misunderstanding between the difference and like the historical difference between like a gay man and a pedophile, and like the conflation of those two terms historically and even now, like the difference between gender and sexuality. And so kind of like understanding where their logical fallacies are, make it a little bit easier to kind of sometimes argue with them. So you're correct. Understanding is the wrong word to use, but it's just kind of like, what argument are you trying to make, because I don't get it? And so it's like, oh, okay, so you're operating from a fallacy to begin with. So that's what we have to go after. Yeah. All right. So we are going to start with Virginia's publisher book. Yeah. So what have you brought to the table today, Virginia?
All right. So I think as readers, very often we are not just interested in the final product, like the book that has been written. Many of us are also really interested to learn about the process, like what inspired the story, what was happening sort of in the author's life at that moment, perhaps, or what was in the author's headspace, what are the themes that they're thinking about, and what may have influenced the direction that they took. And I think with the internet, we often have the opportunity to dive a little bit more into that with author interviews, with articles that are a little bit more readily available. So that's nice that we get to maybe see a different perspective, because as we're reading books, of course, each of us approach a book, we bring ourselves to it through our lens, through our experience, and through our state of mind. So, it's nice to see sort of maybe a different perspective from the author's perspective. What are they thinking of? So for this Prime Month, Prime season, still sounds very weird. My prize season book for today sort of takes this idea of an author interview and turn it into a novel. So the book is called My Lesbian Novel, and it's by Renee Gladman. And as I mentioned, I picked this because of the publisher. This is published by Dorothy, a publishing project. They describe themselves to be a feminist press dedicated to works of fiction or near fiction or writing about fiction. So which this is very much that. And they only publish about 2 books a year because they are quite a small independent press. So I feel like at some point I'll be able to actually read their whole catalog. So I was excited about that. And I first got to know them from, of course, Leonora Carrington. They published a complete stories of Leonora Carrington. And then last year, my number 2 book is Overstaying by Ariana Cox, translated by Damien Sears, which is also published by them. And then earlier this year, I read a really delightful family tragic comedy called Who Has Changed and Who Was Dead by Barbara Cummins. And so this is my 4th Dorothy publishing project book, and I'm really, really excited to keep going and just check out what else they've got. My lesbian novel, as I mentioned, is an interview basically with an author. So our interviewer is just identified as I, just the initial, and our author just has the initial R. May or may not be the author, Renee Gladman, since they share the same initial, but we're not sure if it is. This is kind of like a little bit of autofiction. We're not sure if that's the case, but the book begins with the question by the interviewer, how will you start the novel you wish to write? And that's really what this book is. It's about that writing process. R is hoping to write a novel about June, an architect. And June describes her memory as mushrooms, Fiona. That sort of slowly sort of spread, and you change your brain and change the landscape and change the structure, and just like gets into everywhere. And there is a specific moment that this mushroom stuff is blocking, almost like in her memory, that she can't quite remember. It's her trip to London. June knows that she went with a boyfriend, but something happens there. And after meeting a British woman, and as the interviewer keep commenting every time this British woman comes up, like how come the line just drops off? How come like your story, your paragraph just trails off? Like what is about this British woman? And June doesn't quite know either. So it's a little bit about her and the interviewer and everyone prodding a little bit more to figure out sort of what's going on. Why is there a gap? Because clearly June is quite smitten by this person, but like what is the deal? What actually happened in London? And we'll eventually kind of find out. But R is talking about writing this lesbian romance, and that's what she was hoping to write, or maybe written. It's kind of hard to tell. She's writing it, or she has already written it. The interviewer is like, are you writing as we speak? How come you don't know what happened? How come you don't know what's next? And that's kind of the crux of the issue. Like, R is hoping to write a lesbian romance, and she calls herself a scholar of lesbian romances because she has read so many of them. And there are many things that she loves, like the happily ever after ending, of course, that she believes in, that she wants her lesbian characters to get the care that they deserve. She wants them to feel that they're always protected. But there's also many tropes in the genre that she does not enjoy. And so she's trying to figure out what she should do in her novel. Sometimes in novels she find like the ones that she read, like very often things seem just so like unrealistic, as if a male author was trying to like write a sapphic story and they don't know what they're talking about. But then perhaps this is what books are. It is fantasy. It is a book where you don't have to worry about those inconveniences in your real life. You can just do all the best things and ignore those real life stuff. And maybe that's what she needs to write. And she's trying to figure out, like, do I write through these like boring little bits and pieces, or do I go somewhere different? Like, what are the conventions? What are the expectations that a sapphic story should have? What are people looking for? And what does she want in her book? How can she change sort of this genre? How can she change that sapphic romance into something that feels real to her? And so as we are having this interview, we're kind of getting her to see her point of view, slowly sort of working this out. For example, she feels that in literary fiction that the language is more alive, that the language create a space where you can live in, a space where you can meet people. And that's what she wants. She wants her book to be a space where people can meet. And so she's trying to figure out how to put that in, how to maybe infuse that into her perhaps more a genre kind of story. And how can she combine that? Because she doesn't want to write a literary fiction either, because literary fiction, as she said, is very bad with love. They're always very sad, and she doesn't want her characters to be sad. She doesn't want that. So it's like a really interesting kind of discussion and exploration about writing love stories, writing romances, especially writing stories that feature two women. How is that different from a different kind of love story? And ultimately, it's really about how people connect with one another, because very often as you are reading the book, you kind of get to wonder, like, and the interviewer will ask too, like, are you talking about yourself and your own life, or are you talking about June's life, your character's life? And so everything sort of like kind of blend together a little bit. And as the interview goes on, we get excerpts of the actual novel that she's reading out probably to the interviewer. And so you can see that she's still kind of experimenting with it. At some point, she doesn't even remember the British woman's name, because it's not quite there yet. June is not quite there yet to meet and to admit the name yet. So it's really interesting to see how a writer develops kind of a character. And as she said, sometimes, like she read books and she cannot stand books that when you feel like the characters don't deserve to be there yet, like they're not quite there. And so she's sort of working through those. Like as someone who doesn't read romances, I don't really have any feelings towards her assessments, or her musings about the genre or about literary fiction for that matter. But if you enjoy experimental fiction, which I feel like, because I read enough weirdly structured stuff, that this wasn't that weird to me, but I know that a lot of reviewers find this is so different from everything else that they read. I'm like, okay. But if you like experimental fiction, if you like meta fiction, if you like a book that is really thoughtful about the writing process, about the process of creating art, and you can get a glimpse of how that journey is, I think you will enjoy this novel. Or if you have feelings about romances, you will probably have quite a few things to think about when you read this. So this is My Lesbian Novel by Renee Gladman.
Way to stay true to the brand, Virginia. All right. Okay. So I am going to talk about mine, and I did a graphic novel this time. And I'm going to say before I start that in this particular book, I'd like to give a content warning for suicidal ideation, suicide attempt, homophobic slurs, bullying, and racism. So this book does deal with a lot of really big topics, and the author has set out to do this. This was his intent with this book. So Aiden Navarro is 14 years old. He is Filipino-American, and he loves Boy Scout camp. He loves the songs, he loves the orienteering, he loves the canoeing, he loves getting away from the bullies at his Catholic middle school, who bully him for being overweight, biracial, queer, having high voice, pretty much everything. He's really good at being a scout. He excels at pretty much whatever they put in front of him. He's good at canoeing. He's getting better at archery. He is good at finding his way. He loves being away from his abusive father at home. He loves being a part of something bigger than himself. He loves feeling part of a group, and Scouts gives him that opportunity. What he doesn't love is that some of his fellow campers are going through puberty and all of the experiences that come along with it. He doesn't love that they try to act manly and outman each other, whatever that means. He doesn't love the homophobic slurs that they just kind of fling around at each other. He doesn't love it when they make fun of his higher voice. These are things that he can't change. He doesn't love that he doesn't always fit in with them. And he doesn't love boys. Why would he? In one of kind of like the most heartbreaking section, he's in his camp and he says, I know I'm not gay. Gay boys like other boys. I hate boys. They're mean and scary, and they're always destroying something or saying something dumb or both. I hate that word, gay. It makes me feel unsafe. Now, this is the summer between middle school and high school, and Aiden is still having a good time at Scout Camp despite some of the other campers. He has friends there. The person he shares with the tent with is nice, helps him with his archery, listens to him, talks to him, treats him like a person. And Aiden begins to feel feelings that he doesn't want to feel. He pours these out in letters to his pen pal, Violet, that he met at a Christian camp before. He really doesn't have anyone else to share his struggles with. He keeps them kind of inside himself. He has a choice when he's going through this big transition into high school, whether to continue in Catholic school or to go to a public school. And he's scared. Middle school was hard. Middle school was horrible. And high school is this big unknown. Are things going to get better or are they going to get worse? And if worse, how much worse could they get? He has a fear of the future, fear of what he loves. And all of this comes to a head at this camp, where all of this self-hatred, all of the voices telling him to change things that he can't change about himself, all of the ideas that what he's thinking and what he's feeling are wrong, not only just wrong as a society, but wrong for the Scouts and wrong for his religion. He worries about what his parents are going to think. And it all turns into a horrible fire of self-hatred that threatens to consume him. So, Flamer by Mike Curato is a semi-autobiographical book, graphic novel by the author. It is astoundingly his first graphic novel. He is an illustrator, and this is the first time that he's kind of delved in and told a bit of his own story, fictionalized. He went through old journals, old sketchbooks, photographs, pen pal letters. So he really delved into his own personal history to tell this story. As he explained the process, he said he went back and he re-broke old bones to be able to stand on them again. This story is set in the early 90s, and I feel because he went into those journals and his own personal writing that it feels so accurate. The things that the boys sling around to each other, the jokes that they tell, the way that they talk about things, I remember all of that. And it is so real. Curato tells the story in kind of very simple black and white illustrations. In some ways, they feel very simple, but he's deliberately done that. He didn't want it to feel polished. He didn't want it to feel overwrought. He wanted it to feel real and authentic to his own experience. And then there is the fire, the only kind of glimpse of color that we get through the entire story. The fire can symbolize many things. Flamer was a homophobic slur. Fire can be the religious fiery heart of Christ that Aiden is afraid will consume him and send him down into hellfire. Fire is the yearning that he feels for another boy. And Fire is his own strength that he doesn't quite know yet. This book examines that toxic masculinity, the fight that you really have to do to find and recognize yourself sometimes in a society or culture that doesn't always accept you. And you have to find a way to love yourself when everyone else is telling you that you should hate yourself and be ashamed of yourself. Everyone is telling Aiden that he should be ashamed for being overweight, for having a high voice, for being queer, for being half Filipino. They are constantly telling him to hate, 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 and he has no choice but to listen to it until he finds that inner flame within. This is a really beautifully done graphic novel. Oh, did I cry? Yeah, I cried. I cried hard. I cried hard. It really is a wonderful, wonderful story. It is perhaps one of the most challenged books in America. PEN America reported that it had been banned in schools in at least 6 states during the 2021 to 2022 school year. In 2022, the ALA named it as the 4th most banned and challenged book in the United States due to the inclusion of LGBTQIA+ content and claims that it is sexually explicit. The next year, it was the 5th most banned and challenged book in the United States. It was among the 52 books banned by the Alpine School District following the Utah law Sensitive Materials in School, claiming that it contained pornographic materials. In Jordan High School in Katy, Texas, in August 2022, a parent filed a criminal complaint against the Jordan High School library, forcing the district police to temporarily remove the book for an investigation. The book had already been deemed appropriate for high schoolers by a book review committee in March, and the police eventually returned the book to the school. Flamer was banned by a school district in Oregon and removed from the library as late as March 2025. This is a book that I truly believe should be in every high school library. I believe that everyone should have access to this book because I do believe that this book can save lives. And why would you want to take that away from someone? So I think that this is a very powerful read for readers of any age, for anywhere in your journey, for anywhere in your understanding to see why pride is important, to see why the celebration is important, to see why representation is important. Because it just takes one person to say you're not alone. All right. So if you're looking for that and you're looking, I'm already starting to cry about it again. And I'm just, I would definitely recommend picking up Flamer by Mike Curato. All right. So we've had metafiction. We've had a heart-wrenching graphic novel. Sadie, do we have a YA fantasy? Can we complete the trifecta?
Oh, we can, Corene. Oh, we can. So as I said, I picked this book because of the genre that it was and kind of the book that I was in the mood for. And that was definitely going back to just the genre that I know and that I love. And so, yeah, so this has all of the things that I was looking for. It is a YA urban fantasy with mystery and romance. This is These Witches Don't Burn, courtesy by Isabel Sterling. Now, our story takes place, not surprisingly, for a story about witches in Salem, Massachusetts. And it follows 17-year-old Hannah Walsh. Now, Hannah knows magic. She sells it on a daily basis at her job at the Fly-By-Night Cauldron, a Wiccan shop that appeals to both the tourists who come to Salem for its witchy history, as well as the locals, some of which like to dabble in magic. However, the magic, the books, the crystals, the athames, while all very magical looking, don't actually contain real magic. Not the kind of magic that runs through Hannah's blood. The kind of magic that has been in her family since the witch trials and long before that. The kind of magic that allows Hannah to control fire and water, air and earth. Hannah is an elemental witch. Not a fully fledged one yet. That won't happen until her 18th birthday, but a witch, and a pretty powerful one nonetheless. Magic has been a part of Hannah's life since she was in diapers, and so has Veronica. Veronica is also an elemental witch. A year older than Hannah, the two of them have learned magic and grown up together. Veronica was also Hannah's first girlfriend, the girl that helped Hannah realize that she was a lesbian. The two of them were honestly the perfect couple. They'd been friends forever and knew everything about each other. They were also actually able to talk about their magic with each other, something that is strictly forbidden with any non-witches, something that Hannah has never been able to confide in her best friend, Gemma. Now, their relationship was passionate and loving and exciting, and then it wasn't. On a class trip to New York, the relationship ended very loudly and very, very publicly. So now Hannah is just trying to get through the summer, facing her heartbreak before Veronica goes off to college in September. But Salem is a small town, and the witch community is even smaller, so Hannah is finding it difficult to keep Veronica out of her life. It doesn't help that her ex-girlfriend keeps saying that they should get back together. It also doesn't help that, in direct contrast to her pleas, Veronica is currently giggling in the corner of the store that Hannah works in with one of the hottest girls in their school, Savannah. But it's graduation time, and that means excitement and parties and saying goodbye to friends and having one last good night together. And so Gemma drags Hannah out to a bonfire party in the woods. They haven't been at the party too long, and Hannah and Veronica are already fighting, screaming at each other, when another scream carries through the air. It sounds terrified. It sounds in pain. Both Veronica and Hannah run towards the sound and enter a scene that is confusing. Savannah is screaming and covered in blood. There's a fire burning close by and a dead raccoon hanging from a tree, dripping blood everywhere. Once they determine that the blood on Savannah is not hers, Hannah and Veronica start to take stock of the situation. The raccoon appears as some sort of sacrifice. And the fire burning close by is not just another bonfire, it's a burning pentacle, a very common witchy symbol. Both Veronica and Hannah are terrified. Now, this could be a prank by someone who is not a witch. However, it could also be the work of the most rare and dangerous kind of witch, a blood witch. A blood witch, like the one who tried to take over Hannah's body in New York, who vowed to hunt down both Hannah and Veronica and kill them. The witch who led to the end of their relationship. But it's probably nothing. It must be a mortal prank. It has to be. Even Hannah's grandmother, the head of their coven, says that it's nothing. But Hannah can't let it go. So she convinces Veronica to help her figure it out. Now, both of them have already been given quite a severe punishment for magically putting out the fire at the party. Hannah knows that something else is going on. And so she gets Veronica to help her scry to see if there are any blood witches in Salem. What they discover make their blood run cold. Their discovery leads them to a graduation party where they are hunting a blood witch that they can't find. Now, what Hannah does find that she doesn't expect is Morgan, a red-haired dancer who has just moved to Salem and who Hannah is immediately attracted to. However, their night is once again interrupted, this time by screams of smoke and fire. The house is burning. Hannah and Morgan get outside, along with everyone else. Well, almost everyone. Benton, a friend of Hannah's, is stuck on the second floor, unable to get past the flames. Hannah can't let him die. Now, she knows that she won't burn if she goes inside that fire. She knows that she can control the fire and the air to get herself and Benton out. However, she also knows that if she is discovered using her magic, it would be catastrophic. But she has no choice. And so without thinking, she runs into the flames. She finds Benton, but he passes out just out of view before she gets to him. So she uses her magic to put the fire out. And it works. She gets Benton out and is so relieved. Even though she knows, again, that if anyone saw her put that fire out with her magic, she is screwed. Now, Hannah is expecting the questions about this. However, when a detective comes over and puts handcuffs on her, claiming that she is responsible for starting the fire, Hannah is really not sure what to think. Something is going on. Something that Hannah's parents and grandmother don't see or refuse to see. And so Hannah starts to investigate what is happening. But when more and more incidences happen, when more and more violence comes barreling at her and Veronica and their friends, she has no idea what to think. She's determined to find out who is at the center of this mystery. Is it Evan, the goth kid who has been buying cursing materials at her store quite recently? Is it Morgan, the new dancer who asks Hannah out and really, really wants to get to know her? Or is it the detective himself, also new to town, who seems to be hell-bent on blaming everything on Hannah? Well, Hannah will just have to find out. So this, I mean, it's what you want it to be. I read a review on Goodreads, and that's exactly what it says. Like, it has all the things that you want it to have, and it hits all the points that you want it to hit. It's fun. It has a mystery. It's a little bit over the top with teenage hormones. When people are running for their lives, you don't think that they're going to be interested in new crushes, but I mean, maybe that's just the way teenagers are right now. I don't know. It has a love triangle, which is not my favorite trope, so I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. But it's a lot of fun. So if you're looking for something that's just kind of fun, something that will help you zone out for the summer, if you're wanting to get a little bit more into genre fiction, YA books, then this would be a really, really fun one. Yeah, I think it just kind of hits all those boxes with a little bit more teenage laissez-faire than I care to connect with. That is These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling.
Like, the house is on fire. I'm sorry. Like, maybe you could text your crush after. Fire first, crushes later. I know. All right. We don't have an existential question, but as when we have a month to kind of celebrate, we like to do like our runners up. So I'm going to swing it over to Virginia to give kind of like your runners up of like books that maybe you haven't mentioned on the podcast, fall under the topic, but would love to just kind of give a shout out.
Sure. So I'll stick with the two. The one that I was going to do for this episode is a middle grade graphic novel. And good that I didn't do one because you did a graphic novel. It's called Luna Boy by Jess and Sin Weibo. I think it won the Stonewall Award that year when it was published. Jess and Sin are two Indonesian comic writers. And this is a story about a boy from the moon who's being adopted by a woman from Earth, and he was so happy living there with her in the space station, but then they have to move back to Earth. And now suddenly, instead of just him and his mother, he's got this blended family, and he doesn't quite understand Indonesian. Like, the family doesn't know what to do with him. He's fallen for Noah, a pen pal, but suddenly Noah doesn't want to talk to him, and he's just like very, very confused and very, very unhappy. And he is like just trying to figure himself out. And so he said, like, please take me back, moon, take me back. And the moon was like, okay, we will take you back. But as of course, the date when the moon is supposed to take him back, things started to make a little bit more sense for him. Things started to make a little more changes. And so, he's like, the moon is coming for me, but I don't want to go back anymore. So it's like a lovely, lovely, heartwarming story about sort of supporting a child through like his exploration of his own identity. He's a trans boy, so he's kind of figuring out like, what he likes, what he what he is, what he wants to be, and what makes him comfortable, what makes him him. And it's also got a great, again, color palette in the book, so it's such a great one. So that's one. And then switching gears to another book, The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. I mean, of course I have to mention this book because I don't even really know what a book is about, but one of the review called it the most unhinged cannibal book of my dreams and my nightmares. So I'm like, obviously. And, some people say it's cannibalism like you've never seen before. Yeah. So, I mean, really, do I need anything else? No. But it's about three women who are stuck in a castle and they're running out of food because the castle is under siege. And so they are kind of figuring out what to do with this food situation when suddenly a bunch of like saviors came by, these like godlike figures. They fix everything, but are they really that nice in fixing everything, or do they have some ulterior motive? So yeah, very excited about some potential cannibalism there.
As always. Okay. I am going to recommend some comics because that's kind of what I chose for this topic. There is a collection of queer comics called Be Gay, Do Comics, which I really enjoyed. Like, it's got a little bit of something for everyone. Super fun. So many different voices at work. Just like short little comics that you can read through that were all super, super fun and interesting. I'm always going to give a shout out to Tilly Walden, whom I think is just... maybe one of the best graphic novelists at work. Spinning was like a revelation. That book like changed my brain chemistry. I love that one so much. What is the other one that happens in space that I love so much? I reread that almost every single year. I just enjoy it. Also, for a manga series, Given, I've really, really enjoyed that lately, and that's been really, it's kind of like a band story, but like with the romance and the yearning and then like the guitars, and everyone should really just sit down and have a conversation about like their feelings and intents, and maybe that would really help you out, but they won't. As well as Boys Run the Riot, another manga with a trans protagonist, and very interesting to kind of see that kind of play out in a different country, in a different culture. One that Fiona had talked about, Magic Fish, which I think is also beautiful and wonderful and just so amazingly done. And oh no, Corene's writing, The Legend of Auntie Po, which is a middle grade graphic novel, historical and just absolutely wonderfully done. So there's just, it's really hard to choose whenever we do this, but those are my short picks. Sadie?
All right, I'm going to start with an author that I know has been talked about on the podcast a few times, Melinda Lowe. Last Night at the Telegraph Club is a wonderful historical story about two young women. Also, another author, Anna Marie McLemore. I've talked about a couple of their books on the podcast before. Dark and Deepest Red was one of them. They have a whole bunch of books that will often take fairy tales and kind of put a queer spin on them, a modern spin on them. And they always, quite often will have trans protagonists, but then also they just have queer protagonists, and the story is full of queer characters, which is wonderful. So yeah, Anna Marie McLemore, Melinda Lowe. One that I have not read, but I'm going to give it a shout out anyways, because he just spoke at as part of the Tri-Cities Writers Fest, is Crooked Teeth by Danny Ramadan, a queer Syrian memoir. And I can't speak to the book, but I can speak to how he presented, and he was an absolute joy to watch. And so I have put that one on my list as a book to read because it sounded very, very interesting. It sounded, the way he kind of spoke and the way he read from the book was absolutely hilarious, honestly, and just really, 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 really engaging. So I recommend that one. Let's go with those ones for now.
Perfect. All right. So if you are looking for more recommendations, you can check out the display at the Port Moody Public Library, as well as various lists that are on our website. As we say, anytime we're celebrating a month, just don't make it this month. It can be anything. It can be anywhere. It can be that whole year. Put it in your intense reading spreadsheets.
Yeah, and then you will know whether you actually read Flamer or not if you have an intense reading spreadsheet.
Pretty sure I haven't. I'm pretty sure that I actually read a review of Flamer because a lot of the panels seemed familiar. And I was like, this seems. And then part of it is talking about X-Men. And I was like, I've seen more than 3 X-Men movies, I'm pretty sure. So maybe I was just thinking of that. But anyways, wouldn't you rather be pleasantly surprised by like reading a book all over again?
No, I don't. If I were to read a book all over again, I want to be intentionally reading a book all over again. Then I'm like, I'm choosing to read this book again, not like, oh, wait a second, I already read this.
Fine. Anyways, if you have a spreadsheet or not, make sure to pick up some fantastic Pride reads. And I'm so thankful to all of the authors for kind of sharing their stories and their voices. I'm going to end with a quote from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, as spoken by the great Andre Braugher, as the iconic Captain Holt. After one of the characters, Rosa, comes out as bisexual, he kind of takes her aside for the moment and says, every time someone steps up and says who they are, the world becomes a better, more interesting place. So thank you so much and happy Pride season.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.